literary masterpiece episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. This week's episode is actually the first of two back-to-back scheduled interviews with authors about their soon-to-be published books, and this week's in particular is my first time talking with the author of a new novel. That author is Andrew Mondry, an old friend who is on his way to publishing his first book, The Passion of Saint-Jablonski. So we recorded this earlier in the week, and we talked about the book and a bit about its story, the inspiration behind it, and the process of writing it, and which took years, actually, and several starts and stops along the way. But now he's here with a close to finished product that will be out later this year, and I thought it was a really great and enlightening discussion, and I had a lot of fun. Now, from what I understand, this book's a little bit out there, and it's funny, and I really can't wait to read it once it's released later this year. But before we get to that, one thing that's always funny, well, almost always, is Meghan's Cuckoo Bananas joke of the week. So let's laugh.
And now it's time for Meghan's
Cuckoo bananas joke.
Hi, Meghan.
Hi.
Do you have a joke for us today?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
Why did the banana go to the doctor?
I don't know. Why did the banana go to the doctor?
Because it wasn't peeling well.
Are you peeling well today?
Ba 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 ba.
Alrighty, say goodbye.
Bye. Ba ba.
All right, now for this Maza's Mickey Minute, I'm going to dive into something that has made people a little bit sad and a little bit mad, and I'm going to try to put a little bit more objective lens to it.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra!
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
So, as you may already know, the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer's Island at Walt Disney World have been closed and are set to be replaced by the Piston Peak Cars-themed area. Now, some people are a little mad about this. Some people are big mad about this. Me, I will say that this was a beautiful area of the park that did provide a bit of a respite and some great photo opportunities. But I also think it was very underutilized space for a park with the capacity that it has, and that's constantly looking to change and expand and dive into new experiences. With that said, I recently came across a Twitter thread posted by a man by the name of Bill Zanayati. Sorry if I butchered that. He calls himself an analyst and professor of theme parks, entertainment, and attractions. And what he had to say, I think, puts this conversation into a bit more of an operational lens and maybe can help us understand some of the challenges that the previous attractions that were in this space presented, and why Disney decided to go with the complete overhaul and why they felt that that was needed. So Bill starts off, and I'm pretty sure that this thread was originally posted back when we got the concept art, or the beginning concept art of the Cars area, this Piston Peak area. And he said, "It's hard to see from the art, but there are new ponds, streams, and waterfalls that are being created, so it's not a total loss of water. There will actually be more kinetic energy with this than there currently is in the area. But here comes the interesting part of all of this. But as for why, remember that the rivers of America at Walt Disney World are connected by a lock to the Seven Seas Lagoon. Major challenges exist to this river and drainage in the area that needed to be accounted for. The foundation of the river isn't in great shape, nor is it filtered water. The nature of this river surrounding the island system also prevents construction on the islands. To retain any of this river as is would be impossible, as the connection would need to remain near Thunder Mountain to the lock. One of the key drivers of this redo was requested by the park management itself to eliminate dead ends. That can't be accomplished while retaining navigable river systems. So you have an aging river basin in dire need of resurfacing, logistical nightmares to improve the islands, and dead-end pathways on two sides. Plus, access must be created to get to the other side of the river systems for any expansion. I can tell you that countless rides were taken on the riverboat by key people involved in the decision making, and it was not taken lightly. They know they have to blow everyone out of the water with what gets built on this site, pun intended. It still makes sense. Cars being the IP was selected for WDI by others. Cars makes ridiculous financial and demographic sense. It sells merchandise like no other franchise. It will eventually allow for the removal of the Tomorrowland Speedway on the other side of the park to free up more valuable real estate in the park. It appeals to the Floridian demographic, and it appeals to families, not single millennials. If they were going for that demographic, they would have themed the entire area to a Goofy movie. Cars is also a friendly story that will provide a friendly alternative to the scary villains land beyond. How to fit Cars into the region is actually very real, as JL did concepts for the original films going through places like Yellowstone, but were never realized, though the adjacent franchise Planes and Fire and Rescue does take place in a Yellowstone-like national park. There's a lot more to this concept, and I think you'll see some more Cars-related IP coming around the bend. The aesthetics of the land are based on the Grizzly Peak Recreation Area in DCA, Piston Peak instead of Grizzly Peak. Obviously, there are some aesthetic differences, and it's a Cars ride instead of a Rapids ride, but that's a product of the Magic Kingdom having Tiana so close and the IP requirements set above. In the end, there was no way to save the existing river system. The new lands have major elevation changes that can't be accomplished without altering the river. And the reality is, they have an obligation to push for more capacity in the park, even if it means at the cost of something so big. It will be tough to see for the next 5 to 10 years, but I've been assured it will all be worth it, and the new water features will be much cleaner and feel a lot more fun. So, looking at that just through this more operational lens and the logistical issues that this area presented and the decisions that were made based on those, it puts this a little bit more into perspective. And really, I think kind of, while I didn't know this specifically, it was kind of my supposition. So when they said we're getting rid of this was another one of those things that I was just like, oh, well, that's too bad. But I totally get it. So we're going through a lot of changes with the parks right now, and I think people are focusing a lot on what they're losing. And that's totally understandable, especially with like Muppet Vision. I found that hit me a lot harder than I thought it was going to. And I'm not trying to invalidate anybody's feelings. What I hope, though, is that we maintain kind of a positive lens on everything. Try to understand that Disney is trying to create new and better experiences for us in the parks. And not only for us, for our children, for our families. So, we have to remember to keep that in mind when we're looking at this. Disney is not trying to take something away from us for the sake of taking it away. There's usually a reason. Now, not every reason is good, and not every plan that they put out there ends up either coming to fruition the way that they thought it was going to, or that it is as appealing as they thought it might be. But what I'm saying is Disney's not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to hurt me. They're trying to find ways to develop new experiences for us to share with our friends, with our families. And I always just try to keep that in mind when I am looking at any of these kinds of changes. And it's okay to be sad about them. It's okay to even be a little bit upset about them, like mad about them. But I always try to keep some perspective, and I really hope that other people do too. And one way to make sure that you are never sad or mad on your Disney vacation is to book it through We Do Travel Right. Because We Do Travel Right and their concierge level service with the one-on-one attention you get from an agent will help melt away all of the stress of planning a vacation. And that agent, while one person, has behind them the power of a team, including the dining team, who will help you get all those hard to get reservations while your agent helps you out with finding the right hotel for you, getting your park tickets, helping you navigate the parks and understand how the app works, and all the other little things that go into putting together a Disney vacation, which can be daunting if you're trying to do it on your own. And the best thing about using We Do Travel Right is their services are free. Yeah, you don't pay anything extra for using We Do Travel Right. That's because places like Disney or Universal or cruise lines or all-inclusives build the cost of using an agent into their pricing already. So you are paying for the agent, whether you use one or not. So doesn't it just make sense to use the agent? So head on over to wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA and get your next magical vacation started today.
Well, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
All right, and I am here with Andrew Mondry, who is a local author here in Western Massachusetts, though lately around here it kind of feels like Florida with the heat and humidity. And we are here to talk about, well, I'll let you talk about yourself and your book first, but if you wanted to first just give us the title of, I believe this is your first novel, correct?
That's correct, yep. First novel. It is The Passion of Saint-Jablonski.
All right.
Yep.
Then it was one of those things I was just like, I'm going to trip over this name, so I'm just going to let him say it.
yeah. It's this name itself has a little bit of a backstory, connected to my family history. I had a great aunt did like a genealogy thing years ago, and we noticed that all the people who came over from Poland, they all spelled their names differently. The last name was all different. So there was Mondry, Mondry, and then there was Madres, Madres, and all different kinds of variations of it. And I had this picture in my head of like this gaggle of Polish guys and this kind of Seinfeldian moment where they were just arguing with each other on the docks of Ellis Island about how things are translated and how things are pronounced. because I don't know any of these people. They're apparently related to me, but and so there's a little bit of that history and with the name.
All right. Well, you are Andrew Mondry, and
Correct.
now I'm going to pass it off to you to kind of give you the opportunity to tell people who you are, a little bit of your background, and fire away.
Yeah, so my name's Andrew Mondry. This is my debut novel. I studied creative writing at Western New England University in Springfield, and I worked with Chris for a time. That's how we first met each other many years ago now. And the novel, it's an amalgam of many things over many years, but it's, I think, quintessentially a online novel, so to speak, where it really is dealing with online radicalization and what that looks like in real time, at a moment where, certainly the Republican Party's kind of platform base is just conspiracy theories or misinformation, and goes for liberals too, certainly. So it was born out of that and born out of the anxiety of COVID, and just all of us kind of being forced to consume online content during lockdown. And so the basic premise is kind of what would it look like if all these influencers and conspiracy theorists that we see online, or some of us see online, cracked through the kind of screened prison of the internet and occupied a real space. And what does that look like, and what does that do to communities? And so it just kind of took off from there. But it's an absurd novel. It's a comic novel. It's borderline satire and parody. But it's I think a novel of our time that hopefully people, more than anything, get a kick out of, if not reflect on broader themes of the internet and neoliberal policies and what it means to be in a real community, like a corporeal, community. And, so that's the gist of it, without giving too much of the plot away.
Sure. Now, one of the things that I was looking at was like, well, I can read off the description of this book that's on the website, but it's best if it's coming from straight from the source. So, but before we get into a little bit more about the book and the process here, while this is your first novel, you've already talked about, you've studied creative writing, but where have you been published previously? Where could people have found your work in the past?
Yeah, I have published in just a couple of incredibly obscure online magazines that even I don't read, admittedly. But that's the way of the world. But most recently, I had a short story in Weird Lit magazine, kind of a speculative sci-fi piece, as well as Nude Bruce review. The internet's not all bad. It has brought us some great things, and the online literary community and magazines, I think really do sustain people like me who aren't necessarily writing for a general audience, or her aspirations aren't necessarily to publish to a big audience, but want to write weird, bizarre stories. So those are the two most recent. There's others that I don't even know if the websites or URLs are still valid, but yeah, and I think you probably are like this too, Chris. I mean, being a journalist, it's, you stop thinking about it as as anything more of just it's just behavior, right? It's just, there's something in you for whatever reason, you sit down and you write, or you're curious. And I think if you write like that, or you approach any kind of creative task as natural, as a part of human nature, you kind of can liberate yourself from some of the constraints of form and, or markets, in terms of who are you writing for? So, yeah, it's been a weird, long road, and I never would have thought, like 10 years ago, this would be the kind of novel that I would write, let alone actually the one that sells.
Now, it's funny that it's just funny the way that the different ways that art can take you. And it sounds like this was not necessarily the avenue that it was going, where you thought it was going to take you. But so we've talked about a little bit of the big picture ideas that are kind of explored in this, but would you like to fill people in a little bit on what the premise of this book, kind of the setup for this book, when they pick it up, what they're going to be, the story that they're going to be diving into a little bit?
Yeah, so the protagonist is a guy named Stanislaus Saint-Jablonski. He's a failed professional golfer. And we meet him when living in a crumbling condo in Central Florida with his former caddy, and the condo president has gone missing along with all the money, and the community's reserve account, and so he is thrust to this kind of role of leadership that nothing in his life has prepared him for, So it's him navigating the kind of immediate aftermath of that, and certainly, people in the community wanting heads to roll and wanting to know what happened with their money. But in an attempt to refill the condo coffers, he increasingly gets more desperate and invites everyone from crazy online revivalist Christian sects to new age spirituality cults, who are mining crypto and making NFTs, and stealing the copper out of the walls because it has quote unquote telluric powers, and all while he's doing this. There's one character who's a Catholic worker, a kind of Catholic leftist, who is trying to remind him, that, all these cute, neat ideas and neoliberal self-help projects and spirituality, can't replace, a kind of mutual aid for people. And so I think you can read it on several levels, but certainly one of the inspirations was a critique on, New Age spirituality and how it's kind of supplanted a lot of community-based, organization and political action.
Now, looking at this, did you sit down and decide I'm going to write a novel about this, or was this something that you just kind of started exploring, through writing, and it developed into a novel?
Yeah, I when I first sat down and wrote, what has since been deleted, it doesn't even exist in the novel, but it was a prologue, which is very rare. You see, prologues in novels these days. And it was just going through this kind of list of characters, and I came across, this guy kind of Stash appeared, and I said, well, that's interesting, and I think I started writing it. It was, a much more earnest novel. Like, it was a much more like literary fiction, and then COVID happened, and, just the consumption of content, I wasn't spared. And I remember a post you made, actually, about, I think you said you were turning off the screen time report on your phone. And I said, maybe that's a good idea. That's kind of depressing. And so it was really through the lockdowns that it started to change into this novel about radicalization, and how people interact, our real selves interact with their online doppelgangers and this digital reality, and how it seems, I've had people in my life where it's happened to, where they kind of abandon real life, in favor of, this online world. And whether that is embracing like QAnon, right, and like going to DC on January 6th, or just abandoning the real world in favor of playing Call of Duty for 20 hours out of the day. It can take different forms, but I think there is this idea that we're kind of treat reality as a commodity. And social media is kind of a marketplace of realities now, and doesn't really care what exactly your ethos is or beliefs are. It's whatever is going to get the most likes and shares and engagement.
Yeah. Now, when you're looking at all of these different characters and coming from these different backgrounds and these different ideologies, how much of this was from your own lived experience, and how much was it through observation or even research to understand, what would make somebody who fits into this, character? What would make them tick?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of lived experience, particularly, Stosh is somebody who grew up Catholic. And, I, like me, I think like you too, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, I grew up Catholic, and then I got in my 20s and kind of abandoned all spirituality and religion. But then you start to hit 30, and like I wasn't married at the time, and I didn't have kids, and, my writing career was non-existent. It was stalled. And, you start kind of groping around for systems of belief, and so I did that as well, and and I did a lot of research on a couple of big influencers in New Age spirituality movements, and and things like that, and so it was just kind of taking it all in, and then just thinking what I guess could have been. Like, I see myself as somebody who absolutely, given the right set of circumstances, could have been, red pilled, as people say. I look back and I go, I was single. I was alienated. I was, financially less secure than, my parents were. And I look back and I said, oh, well, this guy, this Stosh, that's his story. He gets red pilled, into this extreme system of beliefs, as a result of alienation, as a result of underemployment and failed dreams, and things like that. So, but there was a decent amount of research, for those interested in kind of a history of online conspiracy theories. Is a book called Q, Into the Storm by Mike Rothschild. And I read that and was really interested to see how, QAnon was just the most recent in a long history of online conspiracy theories, all of which are linked to grifts, and somebody's always making money off these things. And so it was a little bit of both. I think that's the kind of alchemy of fiction.
Now, was there a point as you were writing this, you mentioned that this did start out as a much more serious book. Was there a moment, or was it kind of just an evolution where it transitioned into this more comedic tone?
Kind of ironically, it was the January 6th, insurrection, riot, call it what you will. I think partly, like, I got a text from my mom saying, "Oh my God, they're storming the Capitol," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I turned on the TV and watched, these things that I had only seen online. People carrying flags that say, "Q sent me," and signs that's, "Where we go one, we go all," which is a kind of QAnon slogan. And the Gadsden flag, the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. And I just went, oh my God, they finally, they broke out of the internet. And I think there is something as scary as that was, and I can imagine as scary as it was for people who were there. There is an inherent like goofiness to some of these people when they come into the real world. If you remember, like Charlottesville, the Unite the Right rally. These guys were some of the most like horrible people you could ever meet online. And then you see them and they have bowl cuts and they're wearing polo shirts like I used to wear at Catholic school and carrying their mother's tiki torches. It's hard not to look at that and kind of call it out for what it is, which is, it's sad. It's certainly hateful. And among other things, but like, there's just like a goofiness to it. And a goofiness to, the far right in this country that, I think is just, it's too rich not to explore and kind of poke fun at.
Now, of course, getting one of the more ridiculous characters in this story may not even be human, it seems. There's mention of a pet wild boar named Gator.
Yeah. I gotta be honest with you. I was smoking a lot more weed back then, and I was drinking a lot more than I am now. I don't know. I don't know exactly where that came from. I think, at least I'll say this is the birth of Gator was. I thought that was a good place to start a novel. Like, oh, there's a gator in the pool, and I was like, you're really going to expose yourself for like stereotyping Florida a little too much. So I was like, well, how can I kind of like play with this a little bit in my own ignorance? And so it's like the novel starts with Stash having to investigate whether or not that there was a gator in the pool, only to find that it's a wild boar that are invasive in that part of Florida from my research. And there's a connection to another character in the book. And I had a really sick obsession with the reality show. I'm sure you remember it, Dog the Bounty Hunter. So there's a channel that plays that, I think 24/7. I think they beam it in from a CIA black site, and you can watch it for hours on end. But there was another show on like A&E at the time, and it was like this family that was the whole show. They would like shoot and kill wild boars. And I don't know if I made it all up, but I was just like, I don't know, that seems very Florida in a weird kind of way. So yeah, Gator, the wild boar, he may or may not be magical, and he may or may not be a cryptid. So that's one of the characters, and he does play a consistent role in the book.
Well, I've got a couple of friends and a couple of listeners here who are from Florida, so I'll have to ask them if they have indeed had any wild boar infestations in their time.
Wild boar infestations, and they may, I don't know if this is like depending on where they're from, but up here we have Bigfoot. Down there's something called the skunk ape, allegedly. So he may or may not make an appearance or be lurking. But yeah, it's a paranoid comedy, I think, if you could kind of sum it up, briefly. And so, there's all kinds of bizarre happenings.
So we've talked about how this book, it was written through COVID. From start to finish, how long did it take you to complete first complete the writing, and then, because there's an entire editing process after that, I'd imagine?
Yeah, it's still in the editing process. It's with editors now at the publisher, so I'm there are certain things that will change from what I sent them to about a month ago to what will hit the press. I wrote it over probably 5-6 years, and it was just something I didn't think I was ever gonna publish it, and so I just kept writing and writing and writing. And so at one point, I know word count as a journalist, it was 190,000 words. So it's like it was a massive book, and I have a friend of mine, Dan Bavacqua, who's a writer, and I told him, and he goes, no, if you actually want to publish that, like, you gotta probably chop 100,000 words off it, and that's what I did. It's about 90,000 words now. The editing probably took another year, and then it took 9 months to find, some poor soul to agree to publish it. But the Silent Clamor Press, who's putting it out, is great, and John Jarrett is the publisher there, and he's a really great support. Anyone can submit to him; he'll read it, and it's really been a good experience with them.
Now, one thing that I would imagine, you're cutting out 100,000 words out of a book. There must have been parts that you were really clinging to and trying to figure out, how do I keep this in? I got to cut this down, but I'm in love with this part. Were there moments like that where you were just like, man, I really, really just, I want to find a way to keep this?
Yeah, I think the whole process was kind of like that. It was certainly heartbreaking, and I put the novel down for probably 6 months, and I just said I got to take a break from it. And when I went back, I remember I printed it, and it came out like that. I was like, geez, that's aggressive. But if you look at it, I don't want to sound pretentious, but it's like, if you look at it the way a sculptor looks at marble, you just keep chipping away until you find what that you're actually trying to create is. Because like I said, it for 4 of those 5 years, it was an earnest novel. And then there was something I saw, and I said, no, this is, this guy gets red-pilled, Stash gets red-pilled. And it's a comedy. It's a parody on this stuff and conspiracy theories and whatnot. And so once I saw it like that, it was a little bit easier. But all that stuff, it goes in the file, and maybe I'll use it someday.
Now, I've talked with other editors, and I think they've all at different times or at different levels felt a little bit of trepidation when you're handing off to somebody else now to edit and to have their chance at it. What was that experience like for you, being like, okay, here's my baby, I'm giving it to you, I'm entrusting it to you, please don't hurt me.
yeah I think that by that point it was a little easier. The scary part is actually trying to find a publisher or an agent, because you're just like blasting out emails into the void, and these people are getting countless emails of people just like me, people who are better writers than me, certainly, and people who have more marketable ideas, so that was a little bit scarier. But even through that process, like rejection, 9 months of rejection or silence, leads you to believe like there's more work to be done. And so, I was editing it and looking at it every day until, I signed the contract with Silent Clamor. And, but yeah, now it's just with somebody, and we'll see. After 6 years, I'm ready to be done with it and move on to, I've been writing, 50,000 words into a new manuscript. And so I'm ready to focus on that. But it is scary because it's such a solitary endeavor. I played in bands before, and that you always got somebody to blame. You got somebody to, who shows up late, somebody who drinks too much at the show. And so your failure can always be kind of laundered through the bad actions of somebody else. When you're a writer, it's just you. It's just you and, God bless her, my wife, who had to sit there and listen to me talk about, magical pigs and cryptids and QAnon for 3 years. And golf is like that, right? Like it's this it's just you. It's not a team sport. Like you got to figure it out. It's an individual challenge, and to welcome somebody into that, and give them some authority over the manuscript. It's scary. Like I said, I'm still waiting for it to come back and another round of edits, but we'll see. I'm confident, and I'm ready for it to come out and be a part of the world, the real world, not the digital. So.
Now you kind of answered a little bit my next question, which is going to be, do you have anything else in the works right now? It sounds like you do, and is there anything you want to tell us about that at this point, or is it too fresh at this point?
Yeah, it's a little too early to tell. I mean, there are two things I'm working on, just to keep myself kind of the mind busy. But the one I was referring to is kind of a satire of human resources. I've worked in human resources adjacent fields now for 10 years, and there's a lot there. There's a lot of material there. So, but also, hoping to tackle some more serious questions of, data protection, and the power that some of these human resource solution companies have. And what do they do with our data? So that's what it is right now. It's still kind of a mess, but it's moving. I'm doing it. You gotta sit down with the page to get it done. So, but yeah, for now, let's get this thing out. I'm ready. It's been a long time coming.
Now you're tackling some issues that have some serious undertones to them, but you're looking at it through a comedic lens. How do you find that balance to keep it from being too serious or too goofy? Or is there no such thing as too goofy? Yeah, I mean, I try to allow myself the opportunity to just go as absurd as possible. I promised myself early on, which is why it got to almost 200,000 words, that I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to self-edit while writing. I was just going to write it, and then go back and see what it was like. I don't know. I think it all comes down to intention. And if the intention is to just be goofy and silly, you probably can't go too far. It's sure. Just like if it's just slapstick, if it's just hitting somebody in the head with a ball peen hammer, you can do that over and over again. But I think if the intention is to at least try to interrogate cultural phenomenons like conspiracy theories or cult-like high demand groups, then I think it has to be a little bit more poignant and pointed, and it can never punch down. You can't, as I'm sure you're aware, there is a, the people saying, oh, we can't joke about anything anymore, and it's like, well, no, just challenge yourself to punch up, and you don't just take the low hanging fruit, but do it with a purpose, and don't be afraid to tell the emperor that they have no pants on, or whatever that saying is, their head's on fire. So I think it comes down to intention, and I think that's the hard part about a lot of these conspiracy theorists and online grifters, is that you can't tell a lot of times the true believers from just the opportunists. I look at RFK Jr., who's been on the racket a long time, man. He's been, he's made probably millions of dollars with his Children's Health Defense Fund, which before he was appointed to HHS, Health and Human Services. Yep. And it's hard to tell, is this guy, does he really believe what he's saying? Or is that just, the equivalent of, a used car salesman, slapping the hood and telling you this baby's got another 200,000 miles on it?
So it can be really hard to differentiate between like the victims in these spaces and the victimizers, because it's all a multi-level marketing scheme. It's all like somebody is selling you something to sell somebody else, and it comes down to intention and what your intention is. If it's to make fun of people who can't defend themselves, you're an asshole, and you can actually absolutely take it too far. But if the point is to really try to challenge, authority and who holds it, and people's preconceived notions of their politics, and then I don't think you have to put the reins on a little bit.
It's funny. We're just. I was just having a conversation about this in an earlier episode. It was actually about the episode was about Spaceballs, and we were talking about what makes someone like Mel Brooks so effective, and it's that same kind of thing. There's an intentional purpose for there's intentional messaging within what he's making fun of, and there are some things that he's making fun of that he himself may love, and so
right.
It's really important, I think, to understand the context in which a joke is being made, or a comedic work is being produced. So I think you're spot on with that, and we've seen that a lot, and I think we've seen also people failing to understand that context a lot of the times.
Yeah, it's people talk about being in a post-truth world and stuff like that. I think we live in a world like a post-intent, and it's really all we kind of have is to be able to know who we are and how we behave in real life and online and in online spaces, and to realize that the worlds there's this event horizon, right? Like this moment in which the real world is in kind of conversation with the digital world, and they collide. And I mentioned January 6th earlier. I think that was one of these moments, and there were others too that were violent, albeit a little less violent or a little less spectacular, where people take what they see online as truth, with a capital T, right? Like this is the truth, kind of beyond what I'm seeing, feeling, or experiencing, and then they take what they see online, and it inspires real life action, and sometimes that action is good. I met my wife on a dating app, but sometimes that action is violent and cruel, and driven by real disturbed kind of hatred towards to people and real people, and that's that's what I was trying to interrogate in ways that hopefully makes people laugh along the way, or kind of think about things in a different light.
All right. So you said that the book is currently still in the editing process. What kind of timeline are we looking at here? I know that with editors you don't really know, but and if people wanted to know more about the book and where they might be able to get it, where can they find that information?
Yeah. So right now we're hoping for a September release date. So like you said, depends on what the edits look like, and kind of what I can do with it, and how quickly I can get through it. I do have 2 children, Chris, as you know. The best laid plans, man. The day can slip away from you very quickly. So hopefully, I would hope by the end of September it'll be out. It will be available online, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, digital ebook, on Kindle. So really wherever you get your stuff online, and it may be, for the physical copy, or you can get it on Kindle.
Excellent. And did you also want to say anything? You've mentioned your publisher a couple times, Silent Clamor. If people were interested in looking into them a little bit, where can they find information on them?
Yeah, absolutely. SilentClamorPress.com. Like I said, the publisher John Jarrett is a writer himself, and has been in the space for a long time, and they have I think a couple of books coming out, one in July, one in August. But certainly, if you have any interest, or there are writers out there, they're open for submissions, and he's a very thoughtful reader, and being a writer, when you start to send stuff out to agents and publishers, it's a lot of bad news, and so him being a writer and having done that, he's kind. It's not just shouting into the void, or getting oh thanks, but this isn't right for me or my list or the market at this time. So I urge you to check that site out and some of the titles that he has coming out and that the press is doing. And, SilentClamorPress.com.
Yeah, you mentioned that process a couple of times of going out there. It's got to be a very vulnerable time for you as as a writer, as a person, because this is something that you've put a lot of effort and thought and a lot of yourself into.
Yeah, it's it's a weird situation, and I don't think any writer gets into any fiction writer certainly gets into writing what is essentially a business email, to agents and publishers. You got to kind of kiss their ass a little bit. And, oh, I loved, this book that you, and then you go into the pitch, and then you go into the synopsis, and, any kind of credits you have. And it really was I had somebody tell me, oh, it's a part-time job. And I was like, oh, it can't be that hard. But it's databases and databases of agents and publishers, and you're just scrounging through to see, oh, who's open, and what are they looking for, and who do they work with. And so that was a long 9 months of, around this time, after bedtime, it was I could get an hour or two in, and far more rejection, but it only takes one. It took one acceptance, and here we are. So, it was well worth it, but a vulnerable and taxing, kind of experience to keep being told time and time again, no, we don't want your, ridiculous story. But good luck,
So one last thing, if you had any piece of advice to somebody who was either thinking of writing a novel or is in the process, maybe they've put it down, any advice for them on how to get going, how to either get going or restart themselves, because it's a process that I'd imagine can be daunting, especially if you've put something down, to try to pick it back up.
Yeah, that happened quite a lot. I mean, I sailed with this. It was my firstborn, really. I was single, living alone when I started it. I'm married with 2 kids now. So, it up and down, depending on what was going on. We had deaths in the family, we had celebrations. But I think the way I started thinking about it, because there were those plenty of lulls, and it's well, how do I get back to this? And, oh man, I forgot, I got to go back and read the thing, because I don't really know, where I was or where it was going or anything like that. But I think if you think of it, like I said, it's human behavior, and just go back to the page and just even if you're not picking up the novel right where you left off, get back into it, and don't be afraid to put it down and let it marinate for a little bit, because you'll come back and I think see it with clearer eyes, and you'll like parts. You'll be surprised by your own abilities. And listen, and people said, and I'm sure you've heard this too, being in the industry you are, the industry's dying. The industry's dying. publishing was the same way, and it's not. It's changed. If you walk into a Barnes and Noble, you would think like everything is either, true crime, nonfiction, or like paranormal teenage romance. But there's not. I mean, there's again, there are some good things on the internet, and literary journals and these small independent presses, are the lifeblood of like real creativity and that kind of human endeavor. So just pick it up, just start writing, and if you're stuck, put it down and go take a nap, and then pick it up some other time.
All right. Well, Andrew, I appreciate you taking the time to come on with me. This is a great talk. I can't wait for the book. If there's anything that I can do to help you promote it, feel free to let me know. And again, just thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. I was really excited when you reached out, and like I said, we go way back. So back to the garden center days. So, and fun days. Imagine being in the greenhouse on a day like today. So, I hate to say we've made it, but we at least are not in a greenhouse right now. So thanks, man. I appreciate it. And, I'll be in touch and let you know when the book's out.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, man.
All right. Take care.
Well, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. This was great. Andrew, thank you very much for coming on again. This was a lot of fun. I can't wait to read this book. And of course, next week we have another author who is scheduled to come on, and I'm very much excited to talk with her. I'll have more details about that on our social media, where you can find us at the Maza's Musings podcast on Facebook, Maza's Musings Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. You can find us on TikTok at Maza's Musings Podcast. We're also on Blue Sky and on YouTube, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are listening on YouTube. You can find all of this information and more by going to our website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com, where you will also find past episodes, more information about me and this podcast, and how to sign up for our newsletter. Now, the newsletter comes once a week in your inbox, and it's filled with information on stuff that's coming up with the podcast, things you might have missed. We'll also shout out other podcasts, and we will also let you know about any news, sweepstakes, contests, things like that, things that we find interesting that we think you'll find interesting as well. And while you're there, you can also find how to buy us a blue milk. And that is a way that you can kind of level up your support by giving us a little bit of a monetary boost to help with some of the small costs that go into putting this podcast together. Whether it's buying us blue milk or simply giving us a rating or review on your favorite podcatcher, which helps boost us up in those algorithms that make us more visible and help people find us, we appreciate all the support you can get. And of course, word of mouth is another great way to let people know about this podcast. So tell your friends and your family, and we'd love to have more people join this community that we're building here, which is all about fun. Yes, a lot about Disney, but as this episode illustrates, I'm willing to talk about anything that's fun and interesting, and honestly, where I can learn a thing or two, and maybe you will too. So, if you're interested in joining me on the Maza's Musings podcast, feel free to reach out at mazasmusings@gmail.com. Well, that'll wrap up this episode. Thanks for joining me again. I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. For the Maza's Musings podcast is brought to you by Hi Dad Soup. Check them out at Mickey and Minutes on Instagram.